We are seeing the present view.
Awesome. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. Yeah, we've done this probably 4 times now, but we're always excited to share it with people who are interested. Again, I'm Olivia, Ash, and Matt are my teammates. We worked with Carrie and Carolina Van Horn from the Governor's Office of Climate Preparedness and Disaster Recovery last year. So the project was January to December. Um, and yeah, we're just going to share some takeaways in the project process today. Um, so in partnership with the State Forest Service and the Governor's Office, I really identified communities across the state that would benefit the most from an increase in tree canopy in order to mitigate the impacts of high heat, which we are seeing more and more each year. These communities are disadvantaged and have an average below average tree canopy of 13.4% or less. Um, After we identified those communities, we created a nature-based solutions framework that focused on community-informed and data-driven tree plantings. This framework includes a statewide needs assessment, a tree inventory and analysis, and community guides, which were really tailored to each community that we piloted this project in. Um, and so to test the effectiveness of the framework, we did pilot the project in 3 communities across the state that met our criteria of being disadvantaged and having below average tree canopy. And they were City of Aurora, City of Commerce City, and then the City of Greeley.
So, my name is Matt. For the first part of the needs assessment, we first did a high impact tree canopy analysis. Basically, we're trying to identify high impact areas in our 3 project cities. We're looking at areas that are below state average tree canopy of 13.4%, and we're also disadvantaged communities. This is made in a ArcGIS online map, and we're currently working on transferring a copy of the map. Um, some things we looked at was extreme heat days and cooling degree days to supplement this, so climate related data. We were looking at current and future values and the number of extreme heat days and cooling degree days in high impact cities. The identified high impact areas reside within the high impact cities, just as FYI. So the final deliverables for this map are we created 3 parts of the analysis, a database, an index, and a map. And in the bottom right corner, that should be a link to the high impact area map. Maybe try that really quick, Ash. There we go. If anything shows up, please show up. There it goes. Okay, cool. So in the yellow right here, we have the index score for high impact cities. The numbers represent cities that kind of rated higher on the index score. The higher the score generally means these areas are in the most need. But then we also have separate layers down through the layers where you could toggle them on and off to show the future, the current, the change, and the current cooling degree days and high that days. So if it's climate stuff that you're kind of more interested in seeing, we have layers for that, as well as data that was provided by the governor's office of climate preparedness and disaster recovery. If you're just looking for a summary of like which areas have the higher heat days or have higher cooling degree days, um, this map is super helpful in terms of narrowing down your search. And this covers the whole state of Colorado as FYI. I think that about covers the map. So, here's just an example of some of the things you can do with the map. This is just showing the high impact areas in Commerce City, which is one of our pilot cities. And the teal represents the Commerce City boundaries. This could be broken down by city, just so you narrow your focus and focus on the things that matter to you most when it comes to planning future tree planting projects in these high impact areas. Here's another layer that we also made where we kind of rank the cities in terms the current urban tree canopy coverage in these high impact areas. You can see the darker green represents the more highly forested areas versus the lighter green, which is closer to zero. But just as a sidebar, just because it's the average, it doesn't mean that these tree canopies can't need any improvement. The Colorado State Forest Service says that a 20% or above urban tree canopy coverage is recommended for a lot of communities in Colorado.
So the second part of our high impact tree canopy analysis was the database. So the map provides a valuable visualization of the different areas across Colorado. So you can like visually look at it and click through. But then we also have a database on Sheets, on Google Sheets that you can look through that has every city that's on that map, as well as more specific information. So here's an excerpt of it specifically for the three communities that we worked in. We have Aurora, Commerce City, and Greeley. We also included whether or not each community was a Tree City USA. It's not a metric for measurement, it's just a there for us for reference. And then we have the average tree canopy, which was taken from um, the lowest 50% of census blocks in terms of canopy. And then we have all of our climate data. So first we have the current number of days over 95 degrees Fahrenheit and current number of cooling degree days. Then we have our expected change. So current was taken from the PRISM database, if anyone's familiar with that from Oregon State University. And then we have our expected change, which is taken from the state analysis from the governor's office. And then we use that expected change, which is a little bit less specific than the PRISM data, to identify the anticipated number of days over 95 degrees Fahrenheit and the anticipated number of cooling degree days. And so, since the climate data for the expected change was from the governor's office and it's kind of at a larger scale, we can combine it with the city level data, which is more specific from PRISM, in order to have a localization anticipated number of climate days or days related to climate. And then in addition to that database that just has those raw numbers, we created an index that does a measurement of each of these areas, which is the goal of this is to provide a relative perspective. So we can see the different communities across the state and where everybody stands. The index here scores each city on those three categories that were identified where it comes to tree canopy, heat days, and cooling degree days. We have a canopy deficit score, which is a maximum of 20. And so the higher the score, the lower the canopy is. So it's a little bit of an inverse there. And then we have extreme heat days where the maximum score you could get is a 10. And that's the higher number of heat days, the higher the score. And then cooling degree days, same maximum of 10. Higher the heat day or higher the cooling degree days, the higher the score. And all of these combined measure the vulnerability, frequency, and intensity of heat and the energy needed to mitigate that heat. And they provide like a snapshot of the status of each community. So the higher the total score, the higher the concern. Oops. In this excerpt, we have the three pilot communities that we worked in. And then we also included some examples of other cities just to show the range of scores across the board, across the state. And so we have Alamosa, which has a very high canopy score, but whereas, so very low tree canopy, but is less of a, or has less of a score, lower of a score when it comes to heat days and cooling degree days. And then the inverse of that is Grand Junction, where they have a lower canopy score, but higher concern when it comes to heat days and cooling degree days. And then just to show the scale, the maximum and minimum, Salida has the lowest score of all the cities across the board. And then Los Animas has the highest score across the board. And we really want to call out that all communities identified in our assessment are in need of more trees and could all benefit from having a bolstered tree canopy. And they're all, of course, facing pressures from climate change. So this tool is not meant to exclude or disregard communities or say, hey, this one needs less support than others. It's really just meant to provide a more in-depth look and then a really usable, tangible snapshot of the status. So even though Aurora seems to have a lower score when it comes to canopy, they're meaning that their like canopy scores on the or has a lower canopy, sorry, higher canopy, lower score. It still means that they would really benefit from a bolstered tree canopy.
And then once we had that like statewide analysis completed, we were able to like pool the ones that were tangible for us to pilot the project in. So we performed an on-the-ground tree inventory and identified plantable sites in each of our pilot communities. All of the communities that we piloted the project in had already done or were currently working on inventory projects that looked at right-of-ways and city-owned trees. So for our pilot, we specifically focused on residential areas in order to fill that gap. And then to figure out what specific areas we inventoried, because we mainly looked at like a 5x5 block area, because 3 students didn't have the capability to do a full city. So we did a general assessment of potential sites by canceling out anything that was not a disadvantaged community. And then we used tree equity score to narrow down areas that really had like struggling canopy numbers. Then we went and toured the different sites that were on our list to ground truth what the tree equity score was telling us. And then once we had a list of the narrowed down potential sites, we connected with local staff and set up meetings to walk through the options with them to get their insight and see what would be a best fit from their perspective. Because no one knows their community better than they do. And after meeting with the local government staff, we picked final sites to do our on-the-ground inventory in. And then just a note that Aurora did have some residential data, so we only did plantable sites in those overlapping areas that they already had data for. So we picked like 3 smaller sites in Aurora, again, just looking at the plantable sites. Again, no canopy data for Aurora since it already existed, but we did pull in the data that the city already had later in the project when we analyzed the data. So since we were only doing plantable sites, we picked 3 smaller sites to focus on, and I do want to highlight that all of these inventory trees are not representative of every tree in the area. Since we were working in residential areas, we were a little limited to what we could see from the sidewalks. So these numbers reflect primarily like the front and side yards. And then if we were confident in what we could see from the street that was in the backyards, we did include it. But yeah, there were more trees than this. We just couldn't get all of them. Um, and then on the next slide, we see each dot represents either a plantable spot in Aurora or Commerce City and Greeley. Those dots represent the plantable sites as well as the trees that we inventoried. And based on the trees we inventoried on the next slide, we noticed that the top species found in both Commerce City and Greeley was Siberian elm, and other top species were green ash, tree of heaven, honey locust, and silver maple. And then unfortunately, these species are not necessarily encouraged to plant due to their susceptibility to disease, and they're invasive and hard to manage nature. And we can also see the condition that they are in. So not only does each of these community already like have a lack of sufficient canopy to start with, they also have like fairly bad condition. And they're not really good tree species. So on the next slide, we can see auroras. This is where we pulled in data that already existed. The city was very kind in sharing their data with us and completed more in-depth analysis of aurora's stuff using that data. Their species were honey locust, green ash, and Norway maple. No, you're good. You can go to the next one. Their canopy conditions were like slightly better than the other 2. But yeah, so here we can see the ecosystem benefits as well. Just if you're curious. Again, we didn't pull anything from Aurora since we didn't actually input that data ourselves. But yeah, just the conditions combined with the fact that the majority of these species found in each of the communities are not ideal, pointed us to like recommend to the cities that they need to plant more trees and more appropriate trees now, so that they can reap the benefits of an increased canopy against high heat when the trees mature and as the weather gets hotter every year. So.
Sorry, I'm trying to click around and unmute and everything. So as everybody here knows, of course, the big challenge with trees is that they require long-term care and maintenance. And so community buy-in is really essential when it comes to urban forestry to the success of an urban forest. So there are a lot of challenges and barriers, unfortunately, when it comes to getting this community buy-in. And so we as a team attempted to get a better understanding of what those challenges and barriers are. So we went into the communities of Aurora and Commerce City. And we did a slightly different project for Greeley, but we'll talk about that later. So in Aurora and Commerce City, we performed a variety of engagement methods, again, to get a better understanding of residents' perceptions. We did tabling at public events such as Music in the Park. You can see a picture of us tabling at that event here. We also did Speak Up Commerce City. We performed resident surveys, both physical and online surveys that we offered to residents in both English and Spanish. And then we collated those survey results. And then we also performed outreach to local organizations. Here's an example of a few within Aurora that we reached out to. And the goal of all of this was to determine how people interact with trees in their neighborhoods. Again, those challenges and barriers to getting trees and maintaining trees, what resources people would benefit from to help supporting them with their urban forestry and their local trees. And then also to think about how trees mitigate heat and what people's perceptions and feelings around those things were. So we're just going to briefly walk through a few of these engagement results that we saw. In Aurora, for example, 74% of residents said that trees were important for their neighborhoods. So it was really great to see that people are thinking about trees and that they're aware of the benefits that trees provide. And then we also saw that about 65% of residents said that they wanted more trees in their neighborhood, meaning there is interest in residents getting those trees. We also asked people who they thought should lead the urban forestry projects in their neighborhood. And we were pleased to see that the responses were really that city of Aurora. So there was that interest in having the city take that on and have that relationship with residents, but also empowering residents, working with nonprofits as well to support. And then in Commerce City, we saw some similar results to Aurora, where 63% of residents think about trees every day. We have 76% of residents saying that trees are important to their neighborhood. So people are aware, which I'm sure a lot of us have seen in our work, that trees do provide benefits. And then we also saw that 71% of residents want more trees in their neighborhood. So again, a lot of potential to be able to support and to get that community buy-in. So it's a good basis for moving the projects forward. We asked residents what barriers they face in adding or maintaining trees. And the top three that we saw were maintenance, cost of watering, and professional support for both Commerce City and Aurora, meaning that these cities could bolster the resources and educational materials that they have when it comes to these areas in order to support residents specifically in getting and caring for their trees. So this is a spot where they should be directing resources and finances towards. There was a variety of responses, so safety and rising property value amongst others. So we're not saying only those three should be prioritized, but that those are the three that resonated the most with community or with residents. We asked what benefits trees provide to their community because we really wanted to know what resonates most with residents and what they really care about and recognize. And we saw shade, clean air and water, and mental health as the top ones, but others such as noise buffering, reduced energy bill, and property value improvements were also things that people noted. So again, communications could be really targeting shade, clean air and water, and mental health because that's what residents really recognize. But a variety of communications is, these are the areas that residents identified. So a variety of communications would be beneficial. And then finally, we asked what would be most useful in a tree planting and care guide, which is something that we did create, which I'll talk about in a moment. And residents really saw that more pruning information and resources, planting, watering, and then a variety of other resources would be beneficial to them in Aurora and Commerce City. So coming out of that, we did create community and city guides for for both Aurora and Commerce City. And that includes the lessons that we learned from the outreach and engagement that we performed, as well as information from the on-the-ground inventory. So we compiled all of that into one location. These guides are meant to be used as a resource for the city staff and for community members, and they include very specific community level targeted communication, individualized to each of the cities that we worked in. Information in the guides includes things like, again, the main inventory, proper planting techniques, recommended tree species, and then other specific information and resources local to those communities. So here's just an example of some recommended trees that or some trees that we recommended. It's different between each of the two cities that we worked in. So we really tried to make it specific to them and not just a general list. And then we included information like lifespan, maintenance difficulties, size, the different benefits, and that sort of thing, so that residents have a really good one-stop location to be able to find trees that would fit in their location and their yard size, that sort of thing. And here are just some snippets of what those guides look like. So we have basic planting information on one sheet, and then we have a watering guide based on tree size on another, and then some pruning do's and don'ts. There are many pages in the guides and they're with a lot of information, but here are just some quick snapshots from what we have.
So for Greeley, we went in a little bit of a different direction. What we did was we created a design framework for establishing a community urban forestry committee. I kind of coined the term custody for this one. A design framework to create a committee that involves members of the community, arborists, and city officials to help make decisions on future tree planting projects. This could also include nonprofits and professional organizations such as Tree City USA to chime in. This is supposed to help bridge the gap between community needs and the city of Greeley's efforts to establish an urban forest canopy. And it's meant to aid in existing urban forestry programs, not to replace. You could completely start from scratch and use this as a framework, but if you already have some kind of committee that's like an urban forestry committee, you could just take little bits of this and supplement it into your current program. Next slide. So I think this is me too. So for the project implementation toolkit, the purpose of this product is to provide a framework and guidance for community leaders to use the model developed by this capstone project to implement climate-informed tree planting projects that mitigate extreme heat. This will include why this project matters and needs to be implemented, where to find the project products for use, such as the GIS map index in the database, community engagement framework and questions, so you could perform your own surveys in your neighborhoods, and also to have helpful resources that informed our process and how we actually came to make these deliverables. Next slide. So some outcomes and opportunities. We have a high impact tree canopy analysis, a tree inventory and analysis, community guides, and a growing climate-wise tree canopies toolkit, which kind of contains everything that we just discussed in this presentation. And some opportunities for this is the use of the growing climate-wise tree canopies toolkit that outlines the processes we took, but to also implement community-informed, data-driven, and city-supported tree planting programs. So some acknowledgements here. We like to thank our capstone partners, Carrie Thompson from the Colorado State Forest Service and Carolina Van Horn at the governor's office, as well as our advisor, Alice Riznikova, who is our advisor on this project, and Hector Barantes from the city of Aurora, who really helped us in identifying communities and gave us a lot of resources when it comes to everything as to where we should survey events, and just community guide information that we could use in our community guides. So in order to receive the final products, you could sign up there by scanning that QR code, or you could reach out to Carrie Tomlinson, and imagine also Carolina, ask for more further information. Thank you all for listening to our presentation, and we will take questions now.
We also just really quickly want to add that this project is being continued this year with another capstone program at CU Boulder. So we're really excited to see that. So there will be more work and more information in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I just wanted to add real quick, it was an absolute pleasure. This group was an amazing group to work with. They were innovative and persistent and incredibly hard workers. So on behalf of Colorado State Forest Service, we want to thank you for this amazing product. I do want to mention that this project is now an example project for the master's program for CU Boulder because it was such an exemplary product. They thought this one really was a great one to put out there as an example. And so this was a really cutting edge, state of the art project that these guys completed and is going to be a ripple effect in terms of Colorado State Forest Service programming for years to come. So I have a cold, so I apologize if I'm croaky, but in terms of that, like one question I have for you, Ash, could you explain in terms of the climate data, the time span in which we expect that climate model to play out for those numbers in the index?
Yeah, sorry, let me go back here. It's thinking, sorry, my computer's been a little bit slow. So when we're looking at days over 95 and cooling degree days, it's not tight, like we didn't look at time span so much as saying like a 2 degrees Celsius scenario. So right now we're looking at like a 1.1 scenario that we're like currently in, and then we looked at the change between that and the 2 degrees Celsius scenario. So whenever we get to that one, which unfortunately is seeming soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So just repeat what Ash said, like we are already at the 1.5. That was a projection that I think we were supposed to hit in the next 5 to 10 years, I think. But in terms of Colorado, we are already in that climate model. So yeah, it's the 2% is really a conservative estimate, would you say, Ash, in terms of, yeah, because
Definitely.
there are climate models that go into the 2.5 and the 3 also that are kind of considered more progressive models, but the 2% is considered extremely conservative at this point. Okay, cool. I will open it up. Also, I will let you guys answer some questions here.
I've got a question, I think, for Olivia. On one of the slides that you're talking about, you had like price numbers for different things like stormwater services. Is that like per acre or total price for that city?
So these are pulled directly from, we use CoTreeView to do the inventories, and they automatically populated these ecosystem benefits based on the trees that we inventoried. So out of like if we're looking at Commerce City, the 900 trees we inventoried would equal these amounts of benefits.
Okay.
And
Yes.
CoTreeView
Low.
uses uses is an Planet Geo software, and they're using similar software to iTree, but it's not iTree since we don't have iTree anymore. But it's similar to that.
Yeah, it like you said, Kami, it is the output of iTree. It's the same algorithm. So currently iTree still works, but like it's been defunded. So in terms of that, like it may end up not working over time as a result of not being upkept by the U.S. Forest Service. So, but yeah, these are like Kami said, you can get these numbers if you just use our free online CoTreeView tool for your own communities from your inventories. We have this as an opportunity for communities in Colorado that may not have their own inventory software, that if you have data or you want to collect data, you can come up with these numbers for your community. And then using that index that this group came up with, which is an amazing tool, you can then justify canopy increases for your DIC communities specifically to actually offset that heat impact that they're going to get over time. And so in terms of that, like it's a double doozy evaluation, if you will, to supplement the cause of your program in your community.
Thank you.
Yeah, Katie Rose says drop the link in the chat. Was that the link for CoTreeView? Oh, Kami, you did it. Thank you, Kami. Okay. So I would also say, how is this different from other ones that we've done before in terms of foresters? The whole idea was to get inside of the DIC communities. A lot of times in urban forestry, we come up with our recommended species lists or our, ideal kind of information for these communities to utilize, and we don't talk to the communities. And so this was an effort to actually get inside the communities that we thought were the most susceptible in terms of climate shift over the next 30 years. And so, what do they want for their community? What is it that they see as value? And then utilizing that language, you can customize, or utilizing the framework that this group came up with, you can actually go into those communities, customize the language that you're using to make sure it fits the values of those communities. Like I say, you're not going to get someone watering a tree if they're having a hard time paying for their bills. Or maybe you do, and you have to make sure that their values are represented in those guides and communications that you have with those communities. Uh, like I say, urban foresters know where they need canopy. If I were to ask Rob right now, where do you need canopy? He could tell me. But it's getting the buy-in, getting the community to see why it will benefit them over the long haul. That's the hard part. So this project meant to actually address that issue in terms of those communications.
And that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your continued presentation of your work that you did. I really thought that the folks here would find your work fascinating, and I look forward to seeing the final product. I just signed up to get that information, but I'm sure we'll share it also through the listserv. And thank you, all three of you, for your presentation.
Also, Kimmy, it will be on the Colorado State Forest Service website, and the governor's office will also have a link to it. So we're working, Thaddeus, myself, and Matt are working on getting that on our Colorado State Forest Service website soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Ash, Olivia, and Matt. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Now we'll scooch over to Ross to give his presentation. Ross is the Executive Director of Plant Select. He's going to talk about the Conservation Plant Network. And it just so happened that Ross, when I asked him to present this, that he said he was going to be in Grand Junction today. So he is next door to me right now. He's in my building giving this presentation. So I get to give him a tour of my office after our meeting today. So take it away, Ross. And actually, we're seeing your presenter view, Ross.
Thank you. I'll do swap. That's what I was wondering. So, oh no, it's not letting me swap. It doesn't matter. The words don't match up to the thing, to the pictures anymore. How about that? No?
Nope.
That last one did work. We could just see the presentation, if that's what you're.
I see. Hold on.
It's hard when you're only working with one screen.
Yes, it is. Let me see here. Share screen. I think what I want to do is window. Shoot. Well, it may be a little bit chunky if I don't have if I can't see the next slide, but we'll get it.
No, we just see Cami though, so you're almost there.
Oh, it's not sharing right now?
It's sharing the video of the meeting.
Oh God, help me. Stop sharing. Then I go back into share. Here we go. Let's try this. How's that? Better?
Yep, perfect. Yeah. Well done.
Okay. Well, we're just going to go, we're just going to go this way. So basically, Plant Select is a nonprofit for those who don't know, and I've been director for about 8 years. I'm going to hustle through these slides, but I want to explain why Plant Select got involved with doing a program for municipalities to purchase trees. And it's because I have a lot of drought tolerant, climate ready trees that cities could and should, and maybe they even want to try them. And so I did a contract grow a couple years, and I thought maybe that would get them into the systems, and they did not get into the systems. So I had to kind of figure out a different way of solving this problem. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to cover some of the challenges that I think urban foresters have with purchasing trees, and they're pretty much the same ones I found. And then I'm going to do an overview of this tool, and then I'm going to actually show you a sneak peek of how it goes, or some of the back end of it. Now we're looking at about within 6 weeks of having City of Fort Collins and the Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery having all their information input into the system. And so we're going to be moving on this year, and it'll be a lot of fun. So starting with the basics and what's today, here we have, what are we doing today that is going to be around in 60 years? Obviously, the answer is planting trees. And so what trees should we be planting for 60 years out? Well, you can go to this website by the University of Maryland and see what their climate analog suggests it could look like. So Grand Junction could be like St. George, or closer down east of Las Vegas. Denver, Colorado, the panhandle of Texas or Oklahoma, some really dry places. And so if we're going to get these trees in that are acclimated for these in 60 years, we need to do this now. And that's kind of the problem. We're assessing today's diversity and still actually collecting all the inventory. Technology is making it fairly easy to get our inventories uploaded to one place where we can see them, download them, move them around. But what are we doing about the future diversity? And we just saw a presentation where they're talking about climate change and things like that. Climate change is making planning for tree diversity in 60 years even harder. And I think that what's going to happen is we're going to have a standard operating procedure where a percentage of trees are just going to be, semi-random that we get every year just to see if they live. And that's how we would find out whether or not they're going to be good for the future as we move through it. So city foresters have probably the hardest procurement job in horticulture, and they are responsible for providing all these different services. You guys just carried them or covered them, and it's not easy. But, foresters still have to settle for choosing from what's available and not what is ideal for long-term canopies. City councils don't understand about the root balls, right? So there's about 5 challenges I found with getting trees into the urban settings that city foresters probably face. And the first one is they can only buy the trees that are available. So what trees are available? They're the trees that the nurseries decide to grow. And those nurseries they want to grow things that are going to sell. And so they look towards the landscape architects. Landscape architects like pretty things, maybe not so much functional things. So foresters want more oaks, but all they can get is pear trees, just because Little Valley's got a lot of inventory of them, and it's taking up space where they could be oaks if they were on order. Challenge number 2, the budget constraints versus quality reality. So city budgets are tight, and one of the strongest problems here is that city foresters have to use their budget that year that it's budgeted in. So low bid procurement rules, the cheapest trees win, not always the healthiest. It's hard to explain high quality nursery stock costs are more upfront, but saves money later. And then city councils, they like to talk about the number of trees instead of, better trees for their community. So we have to prove this stuff to them. Challenge number 3 takes, 5 years. So the procurement rules are not designed for living systems, especially for trees. And challenge 4, the nurseries don't want to grow trees without a sales history. So they manage their risks and they minimize their costs and losses by choosing trees they know they can grow and they know that are going to sell. So when we think about it, the current method for nurseries now to grow trees is they shoulder all the responsibility and all the money to get that tree to a 2-inch size. They are not asking for money up front, most of them. They're not collecting money over the years. And so when they do their projections, how do they know what's going to sell in 5 years? It's a crapshoot. And when they get burned because salespeople change, the economy changes or trends change, they get burned, they're more likely to stick with the old reliable trees that they know will sell. And so it makes it harder to bring new products into the supply chain. City foresters face accountability without control of the trees they get a lot of times. So, your job may be judged on survival rates or canopy coverage. Of course, public safety, which has to do more with the maintenance, but also equity in tree distribution. So now we start to think about how to prove it, though you're doing what to tackle those issues. But often, if they could control the species that they get and a little bit manage their budget a little bit more or have control over how much they get to spend in the future, then they might be able to tackle some of those other problems. And I really like this saying because we do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. So we may have goals for diversity. We may have goals for qualities, but what is the system supporting those goals? So why can't it be this simple? You write an RFP, 5 years later, you make a smart contract, and 5 years later, you pick up your tree. Well, it can be this simple. The technology's there, and this program I'm going to introduce really has its own lane. And it's not a lane that's taking over a whole bunch of other lanes. It's just very simple. And that's what I really like about it. So here's how it'll work in the overview. So city foresters post their RFPs, which they normally do now. Now, I don't know about out here on the Western Slope, but I know that there are cities that, if they want the quality trees, they will make a PO for a dollar amount that's lower than the threshold of which they have to get an 3 bids for. So that's probably going to change. So they have to actually have an RFP that will account for a lot of dollars. And in that RFP, they should be able to specify what trees they want, the provenances they want them from, the rootstocks they want them on, the growing methods they want them to be used on them, like air pots, so they have a good root mass. They could even go and specify they don't want chemical use on them. They can put anything in these RFPs, and then they send it out to bid. Cities can then go out to build in, they can immediately build into their RFPs sustainable practices. So for example, let's say a new biodegradable plastic comes around. They can specify that in the RFP. The nurseries can research it, decide whether or not they want to use it for something that may already be sold, and then they can incorporate it in there. So this now puts the city foresters driving the nursery stock, how it's delivered, and things like that. Now, for that, privilege and for contract purposes, the cities are going to pay each year of the tree's growth. So why don't we have 5-year contracts right now? Davy Tree's out there pruning trees on the city streets, and they have a 5-year contract. Well, the reason is they do the work in the first year, and you can go see the work. It's proven. They write the invoice, and the city pays it. They do it the next year, same thing. The reason they don't do a contract for every year is because then it just gets too cumbersome. They don't need to do that. But when it comes to growing a tree, we have to look at these things a little bit differently. And we talk to our accountants and talk to them about, okay, the first year you're buying a sapling. Now, we have software here that is proving that that sapling is alive in the quantities and the fashion that you want it grown, from the provenance you want it, on the rootstock you want it on. We can prove that in the year one or year two. And then every year after year one or year two, you're basically servicing that tree to its sellable size, just like Davy trees getting contracts to service the maintenance of the trees on the street. Makes it a lot simpler. But the thing is, with contracts, you have to have it proven, and the cities actually have to pay on that contract annually. This allows city foresters to actually keep the same budget that they have, but just put that money towards young trees, second year trees, third year trees, every year, as we move into the future. And this is what the back end of one of the screens of the program looks like. And basically, you can see from the right to the left, this is how it would look if you opened it up. You see where that plant is in the supply chain. This is a chain of custody. Now, if there was a rootstock that was specified on this, you'd see another block down below of those white boxes, and at some point there would be a line that would join to those two rows of boxes together, and that would be your final product. So even the person in the accounting department could open up this program and say, there's my plant, and there's the rootstock, and this is the stages it's at. So now what this does is it allows for nurseries to accurately plan which trees to grow and track their tree growth. They're going to want to participate because this allows them to basically start growing plants that are already sold, and they collect a percentage of those plants that they are growing each year. That way you can get new climate resilient trees into the market sooner in the way you want it. And that's what this oversight of this program does. So how does this look? Let's take just a quick visual on this. So for example, Pearl Mountain, it's a big tooth maple Plant Select will probably be promoting in the future. To the left there is Freddie. He's been collecting scion and sending it off to nurseries like Heritage and things like that. So he's going to write in his RFP, he's sending off hundreds of scions, as a matter of fact. And he wants that on a rootstock that's Manzano maple so that it's adaptable to high pH soils. But he is going to then write an RFP specifying he wants 10 of those. Well, if he's sending off hundreds of them, how do we get around to having that nursery make it useful that they're going to grow? They want a contract that grows 100. They don't want a contract that grows 10. Well, we can start to do group orders. You could do that through Plant Select. And it's not like we're going to be capturing any money off that. How do I say this? We're going to be just like any other entity. It's just going to be a group order that gets dispersed to the cities. And so each city can say, we want 10 of these, 10 of these, 10 of these. And in Freddie's RFP, he will say, I want 10, and I will make a bid from Plant Select and pretty much pass the cost through and say, here's 10, and then whatever other city, there's your 10, there's your 10. So then you'll go through, and each year you can see it's a percentage of the tree until you receive the final product. You can specify the season you want it from. And the big bonus is we all know trees that are sold above ground, like in June and July, those cost about 30 to 40% more than field trees that come out of the field. Now, if you have the space at your municipality to store trees, and you're planning ahead 5 years, you can actually specify you want all your trees field grown. That means, or at field prices, and you'll take them in April. That means you're going to be saving about 30% off the trees that maybe you would be getting over the summer above ground. So in an efficient supply chain, you're going to save a lot of water. And if you think about, there was a study in 2009 that all plants that are grown for horticulture purposes only 60% of them actually get sold. That means 40% of them are thrown away at different stages through the whole thing. But that's a lot of water that gets chucked out. And a lot of those plants that get chucked out in the retail stage are actually sellable. And some nurseries even say that, a 5% loss or shrinkage of sellable plants is acceptable. Well, imagine if all the plants on a nursery were contract grown. You'd be saving a lot of water. The nurseries would be able to focus on other things because they know the plants are already sold. They just have to keep track of them, which this program will make fairly easy. This program also is designed actually for better transparency on plant provenance. So this actually happened to me while I was at the Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery, and I did a bid for like $50,000 for a contractor that was doing re-veg work in the county of Boulder, and got the contract going. Everything was fine, and then a year later, City of Boulder, the municipality, came back and said, "No, we can't accept these Sensation maples. We can't accept the Woods Rose because the genetics were not from." They didn't want clones, and the genetics were not from Boulder County specific. Well, with this program, you're going to actually be allowed to go out in the field, collect those genetics. So Boulder could go out and collect all the seed they want from Acer Negundos, and then they can collect it from their Woods Rose. They could send it to a nursery, maybe Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery, and it would be kept track in the supply chain so that they know when it came back to them, it would be proven that that was the plant that they ordered. Even if the county of Larimer did the same plants and they put those plants side by side, they had the same Woods Rose, the same boxwood or box elders right next to one another in the same hydrozone, making it easy for a nursery, they would keep them separate because of the documentation that is specified in the RFP, and they're kept track every time they move. So, and essentially what you're looking at is in a world where diversity is seemingly declining because big companies, big nurseries are gobbling up small nurseries and things like that, and they are looking more at a bottom line of what they're selling. This way, they are going to be able to increase the genetic diversity because you can have now provenance specific plants going to those same nurseries, and the nurseries can know that they can grow a bur oak, they can grow these plants, but it's the fact that they can increase the genetic diversity because all you need are people to go out and get those genetics. Anyway, this is really exciting for, I think, native plant people and all the plants out there to try new things. And when the nursery knows that the plant's already sold, they're not going to be complaining about like, well, I don't know if I want to do that. And especially if it's trees and they get a portion of that percent every year. So think about it. The nurseries are paying off their supply chain every year anyway. All they have to do is prove that it was paid to fulfill the contract to the city. So I hope that makes sense if I'm explaining it correctly. What this platform also does is it allows for supply chains to be cut down immediately or shut down immediately. If a new pest or disease is spotted on a plant in a county, they can actually go back to their software back end and look at and trace it where it came from. So that is a huge bonus, and I think the Department of Ag would actually love it if every nursery was able to just be like, oh yeah, here's our history, this is where it came from, and just show them on the computer. They don't have to keep all the paperwork or anything like that, or they don't need to fumble through it. They can open up the program and see it. The other thing about this platform is it's available to any organization. This is not Plant Select specific. Plant Select is going to have its own license. Colorado Native Plant Society can have its license. City of Boulder, City of Fort Collins, City of Grand Junction, anybody can have the license. How much are we looking at for a license per year? About $1,750. That's pretty inexpensive for what you get. You get contracts, you get traceability. So we're going to license this out, municipalities, growers, arboretums, developers. When I say arboretums, universities and botanic gardens, this platform has spaces where you can take notes on the plants, cultivation of the plant, how it's cultivated, what chemicals you use on it, all those things that are associated with a contract that somebody might specify. We want to know whether or not neonics were used on it. Well, it has to be documented that they weren't used, right? So that can be taken. And I was thinking about Christina. She could use this on her studies on the canal. See, hopefully I'm not running out of time. Okay, I'm doing okay. So in this platform, for what you'd get, this is it. So Plant Select would have their software. City of Boulder, they would have their software. They'd have a back end that they could log into on a computer, and you usually would have somebody maybe on the accountant side, somebody, manager or something like that, looking at that for the most part. What all the, setting the contracts up, doing bids, that would be in the office. Then you get 5 phone app licenses. Now, what those do allows you to actually have your employees have access to one of the pieces of or all the pieces of the supply chain on their phone, where they can actually document and we received this plant, and then we took it over there and we put it here, and then we moved, and now we're moving it again. We're taking another, scanning the QR code, moving it over here, moving it over there. Most companies are set up with one person being in charge of one portion of the supply chain. So if you have Scott Skogerbo, let's say, who's the propagator at Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery, he's in charge of going and securing the genetics. So he travels all around getting these plants. He could take it right from the provenance, bring it right to the greenhouse, make sure it's there. Then he will grow it up a little bit, and then he'll send it out to production. And he's not involved with all the other stuff, so he's not even going to really use the last components of the supply chain. He's just taking care of the first part. Same with the shipping guy or the receiving guy. They are only responsible for one thing. Anyway, I'll show you how that goes. Then there's a third public facing component to this, and it basically just compiles all the information that you're taking now, and it puts it onto a site where you can then advertise the products that you're selling. You can reveal where they're coming from. The transparency is manageable. You may not want to show where things come from. You don't have to let that be shown. But this is how it would look if you were on the back end. So this is a movie, and hopefully you can see it. And this is the supply chain I just pointed on the left, right? So the receiving one is actually the last. It kind of works backwards. But as you watched, it traces this black line. So this plant started in the propagation house. It moved to two different hoop houses, and then it moved to Louis Field, and then it ended up at the City of Fort Collins holding yard. Now, the City of Fort Collins they're going to have a license, and they're going to have 5 apps. Somebody can actually go plant that tree and then document where that plant was planted, so that then they can upload all this information, the provenance, how it was grown, whatever you decide you're going to capture in your RFP and your contract, upload it to your iTree or your Planet Geo. You could do all this stuff, and imagine what the value of that information will be in 100 years if that tree is still alive. That's going to be pretty powerful information. So let's pretend that this is, let's look at the scalability of this kind of process. So Plant Select may buy, we're going to have our own license. City of Boulder, City of Fort Collins. What if you have one person that's way out in a field is like the only supplier of, let's say, dwarf conifers, and they provide scion. So I'm talking about Kirk Fiesler and his LaPorte Avenue Nursery. He wants to be part of this contracts. He wants to make money still, but he has to be part of the supply chain. He doesn't want to spend, $1,700. How can he be part of the supply chain and document it so that the contract the city is completing it falls in that contract. Well, he just buys the app for $30. And all he does is see what he's collecting, track it off, take it to the nursery, hand it off there, and then they take it on from there. He doesn't get to see anything else beyond that, but it keeps him in the supply chain, even as a small grower. And that's important. So this is very much scalable. And now imagine, what if you're looking at this license being used by the Colorado Native Plant Society? They could buy hundreds of licenses for the app and then hand them out to all the people that are collecting all their genetics from their native plants, and then actually have them brought to different nurseries and traced to the supply chain and then sold back to the provenances that they came from. That is what is capable with this program. I'm going to just show you real quickly a brief of what the app looked like. This is the app. This is the home page. That's all there is on it. This is the settings. That's all the settings. It's very simple. It speaks any language you want. Right now we have about 9 different workflows through the supply chain. So the number 1 is going to be like the Scott Skogerbo. He's going to be out collecting stuff. So we'll look at that one. Number 2 is going to be more the shifting within the nursery. Number 3 may be more shifting. And then all the way till it moves to another nursery, and then ultimately to the cities. So current method of doing these things: you go out, collect seed or whatever you're collecting, you put it in a package, you write your names on it. A lot of times you get the name wrong. Okay, Rambler's not the cultivar here. We have a weird code that's a cultivar. Rambler's the trademark name. We have an accession number. That means nothing to a grower. But it means everything to the Botanic Gardens, because that's where all the information is stored with that accession number. But that information is not passed on. A grower, if I hand this packet to them, they may care that it's from the Denver Botanic Gardens, but probably not. They just want the name. And you know what? The name is wrong. So you'll go in, you'll click here, you'll verify you have, if you look at the bottom of the center picture, there's 6 steps in this. And all you do is quickly go through the steps. It takes about 30 seconds. You don't need cellular data. You don't need Wi-Fi. You can do this all offline in the field. The company we hired was actually doing this traceability for coffee, cotton, carbon footprints, and tree inventories in Africa. I mean, so it's designed to be off-grid. And then when you come back into cell or Wi-Fi, then you can upload and sync everything. But at any rate, when you open this up, you see I'm the user, you pick your product. Now, imagine this. When you're going looking for plants, a lot of people think, oh, we find plants, but really, before you leave, you're actually knowing what you're going to look for. So what you do is you put the names of the plants you're looking for into your inventory of what you're looking for, and then you can have a drop down and select it. You could upload all the native plants in a county if you want, but it would probably bog the system down. Then we have it, select by contract number down the bottom, but it doesn't have to be by like that. It could be by expedition number or, something like that, like somebody going on an expedition. Then what you do is you take a picture. It could be seed, it could be scion, and that picture documents the GPS location, right? You enter in the quantity, you enter in the unit, and then you move on. Now we go to 4 of 6 steps, and it's a pain to enter in the tag entry, and that's where mistakes can happen. So it's easier to just scan it. Again, no cell phone, no cellular data, no Wi-Fi. So when you go out into the field, you're going to carry a bunch of blank QR codes. We can put them on any tags. You'll be assigned these. These will come. You'll just have an inventory of blank QR codes. So you'll never be out of them. You have to have them printed if you're going to stick it onto a seed packet like this, or maybe you want to put it on a tag. Now, if you look at this seed packet and you think, oh, maybe there's thousands of seeds in there, how does that get dispersed when you get down to one plant? Well, through the chain of custody, you keep scanning. You'll have another in the supply chain, that workflow. You'll have another area where you'll actually go, oh, I'm going to take 100, this is a packet of 100 seeds and I'm giving 50 seeds somewhere else. Then you get a new QR code, put it on the packet you're giving away, state the quantity you're giving, and those calculations will follow through the whole supply chain. I left, 50 here at this nursery, and I'm giving these 50 to a different nursery. So it works the same with growing trees in flats and then growing them out to 2 inches. Same thing. You can have lots in a flat, and you can have individuals in the field. Takes about 30 seconds to do the whole thing. You basically look at the last screen to confirm you got the number right, product right, and you're done. And that's it. And then you'll have actions that'll help people that are on the ground receiving plants from nurseries, or letting them know where these plants are supposed to be. You can scan a QR code. You find something you want to know what it is, who's it for. You can just scan it and it'll tell you what it's about, all the information. And this was just a picture to show that this phone doesn't have cellular data, and I was off the Wi-Fi, and it still brought up. I did a scan of that QR code, still gave me the product. So on the back end, why I think breeders and things like this, and nurseries especially, are going to really like this is because this is the harvest view. So all those app things that I just showed you, when I go out in the field, this is what you get on the back end. You get to see where all those places of the genetics were. So the one over there in Wisconsin was when I went to visit my mother-in-law in the Botanic Garden. I thought, I'll just see if this works over here. Yes, it works everywhere. And imagine a nursery that has a person like Scott Skogerbo, and all that information is in his head. When he retired, he tried to pass on all that information. But imagine a nursery being able to open up this document and then actually go to a place and say, that was on the 2025-1021. That is where you need to go collect these seeds right now. So it pretty much puts all the genetics and the information that the nursery has been paying for into their hands. And it makes it easier for a propagator to leave without having these big gaps in supply chains, or not knowing where to get things, or what times to go visit places to get seed or scion. So this is the supply chain. It's going to run through this little video, but I clicked on one of the things that were in the supply chain. And you can see here that it opened up what it was. It's Curly Lock Scrub Oak, the owner, the weight. But this is where I think cities are going to really, really get some traction, is because all this is calculatable. This can be measured, and the nurseries can get somebody to do an assessment of their nursery on how much water they're using for a plant. And they can start to actually, having the documentation on this chain of custody allows you to calculate how much water you're using per tree. Now, I'm going to show you, I think, a QR code, or that QR code for the water there goes into a short detail from the person that the company that's doing the program, and I'll explain how those things can be calculated or utilized. It's a really, really cool deal. This is probably years into the future when we get there, but if you have contracts and nurseries know that the plants that they're growing are already sold, they're going to have time to do more things like this. So I'm thinking of super trees, because I see super trees all the time here. They've been doing a lot of work for getting with nurseries. Now imagine super trees having their entire inventory sold before they actually start growing. This changes how nurseries value themselves. So we're losing a lot of nurseries because the land's more important than the business. Now imagine a world where Super Trees has hundreds of contracts that are worth millions of dollars. That contract value could actually be larger than the property and the inventory and everything else on that property. It's a different way of thinking, but we're moving into a place where the corner of the nursery that is small may be the only availability listed, because everything else could be pre-sold. Now, availability is never going to go away, because you still have car accidents that take out trees and all this other stuff, and you have garden centers and contractors. But nurseries may be really excited about having more contracts, because those trees are sold. So how does the buyer dashboard look? If you cut me off, Cami, if I'm running out of time, okay?
We're running pretty short, so yeah, if you could
Okay,
wrap
here
her
we
up.
go. I'll finish up real quick. So here's the
Perfect.
buyer
Thank you.
profile. This is where City of Fort Collins would do their they upload their whole portfolio. They have templates for RFPs. These are the RFPs. You can see they're active ones. There's drafts. There's all those kinds of things. Then you can actually do like a bid evaluation. So the seller puts in a bid, and then you can see it was rejected. It was rejected. Oh, that one was contracted for. And it lets the nursery know immediately that those plants are contracted for. So that means you're not having a nursery double bid stuff and then being like, oops, I double sold things. That will be more minimized. The seller, the municipality, goes through the same sort of bid analysis. You can see what their evaluation score is. You can reevaluate it. This is directly from the City of Fort Collins means of measuring bids, the scopes of proposals. They get these scores carry different weights, and then you end up with a total possible score of 100, but I think that one was like 56. So then you have the seller dashboard. Let me see it. Seller dashboard. They look at their active RFPs. Then they can have my bids. I might scan through this real quick, but they can open them up. They can preview the PDF. At the bottom of the PDF, you'll have the value of the RFP. You will go, as you scroll down, you also have the listing of the plants that you bid on. And how we manage templates with RFPs and contracts and things like that is the plant lists are actually separate. You download the Excel spreadsheet and make the bid on the Excel spreadsheet, and then that is put back into the RFP and contract like you're seeing here. I'm not going to wait for this to go all the way through. Oh, I could have. Maybe I'll wait. Maybe we'll go through here and see if I can't squish it a little forward here. Well, anyway, I'm going to just scan it up, but I'm going to have more info. And so if you want to sign up, and I can do a personal sort of more demonstration. And as things move forward, there's more documentation. I think cities are requiring this program falls within ADA standards and all these other things that I can share. And we can also share contracts for templates across the municipalities, and everybody's eyes can get on them and say, yeah, this is something I can use. And that way, even small towns can participate with minimal input into having to go through a contract and like vet it and all these other things. So that's what I got. And if there's any questions, please reach out to me. So I just stopped sharing.
Yeah, thank you. We can
go.
take a few questions if anyone had anything they wanted to ask Ross.
Hopefully that was clearer than the last time I did the presentation. I kind of changed it up a tad, and anyway.
I thought it made so much sense to streamline and make it more, to put everything electronic so that kind of take out some of the human, more, potential for human error by writing things down and reading people's handwriting.
Okay. Well, if you think about it, all this stuff is getting done right now, and you're right. They're just doing it by hand, and then they go out to do their inventory. This program could be an inventory program, and it probably will be. But we're just, that's years away. And but obviously it can be, because if everything on a nursery is tracked using this method, then boom, there you go. You'll know where everything is on the nursery. You just look it up on your phone; it'll direct you there. Or if it's in the wild and you want to know where to go collect, you don't have to give directions. You just follow maps. Anyway, that's what will happen in the future here on this.
Yeah, I think it's great. Thank you for sharing, Ross. I'm looking forward to seeing it continue to grow and be utilized.
Sure. Thank you all.
Now we're in the round robin session where people can ask questions, share what's working, what's not working, get some feedback from people from other communities. If you don't share things, then I have to start calling on communities, and Nobody likes that. So share successes, share, just share. The point is to just get to know each other, kind of break down the silos across the state, across the Western Slope. So please let us know what's going on in your communities. Will.
Can you hear me, Cami?
Yeah, please.
This is Will. With that first presentation, the one thing we've really struggled with in our community is the rental market. When someone's in a rental home, they have absolutely no care for the trees whatsoever, and it's hard to get them motivated to value those assets. And of course, as everyone knows, a tree is a multi-decade investment. I was kind of curious with their study if they looked at the difference between home ownership and home rental in those communities. And if there's been any thought of reaching out to the landlords and actually getting them to invest in the trees, since they actually own the property, maybe they do more of the care, even if they have 3 or 4 different renters in. They're the ones taking care of the trees, and getting them to see that as an investment in their property, a way to beautify it, increase the rates they can charge for rent, those kind of things.
Yeah, I don't know if they did. They had to, since they're students, they had to leave the meeting and go to class, but I can reach out to them and ask if they considered any of the rental side, and send it back to the group with their answer.
I really thought what they were doing, the idea of increasing the tree canopy, is really worthwhile, and especially as we go more of a non-grass type landscape across the state, those trees are going to be even more valuable for that cooling effect for certain. And we see it in our community here. You go to areas that have greater home ownership and you have gorgeous, huge trees. You go to areas that are lower on the social economic scale, and there's disease trees, there's trees that haven't been watered in years, and just being able to fix that sure would be valuable, and it improves the look of the whole area too. People feel better about living in those neighborhoods when they have these massive gorgeous trees. We used to say that about lawns. Lawns will make any neighborhood happier, but of course, we're really getting away from the cool season turf now. So the trees are a great idea if we can just get folks to take care of them, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, and that's what we've been doing with some of the IRA funds that we receive from the government. The city of Grand Junction, we've been planting trees in some of those lower income areas, trying to improve the canopy, and water is a big part of it, and continued care. So yeah, I'll ask Ash if they did look at the ownership on any of those properties, and like Carrie said, that there's another set of students who are continuing the research, and see if they're going to consider that portion of it. So yeah, thanks, Will. I don't know if anyone has any feedback on the thought of the landlords and the rental market and care of trees. If anyone wants to share thoughts, if they've had any successes with getting landlords to care for the landscape. I know it's a big struggle in Grand Junction. We have to go all the way to 11 o'clock to get our full 2 CEUs. So y'all have to talk to me.
I can add something on that, Cami. This is Mark Wagner.
Hi, Mark.
Yeah, so I guess not 100% directly related to that, but similarly, I tend to work a little bit more with landowners, not directly in the urban areas, but a little bit more out in rural areas, with my good neighbor authority duties, and so mostly bordering on public lands. But we're also kind of experiencing some issues with that, just in terms of like second landowners, and less, like I said, from an urban tree standpoint, but more from a fire mitigation, WUI, fuels concern standpoint. And it's challenging, just like the last commenter said about having some diverse or different home ownership or land ownership situations. So experiencing kind of something similar with when folks are only out at their property maybe for a couple of weeks out of the year, they might have a little bit less buy-in and activity and action on the WUI and defensible space front. So yeah, like I said, not 100% related, but seeing as how that's kind of what I'm out doing right now,
Right.
it's popped into my mind. So anyways.
Yeah, that's an interesting correlation between landlords and second homeowners.
If I could jump in,
Yeah, go
one
ahead,
of
Morgan.
the successful things, I used to work as partnership coordinator in Texas a few years ago, and have worked my whole career with homeowners and renters. Been a renter my whole life. My whole family's a bunch of renters. I have found leveraging ordinances to be a pretty successful strategy, especially with city council. You know, renters have like a bad rap. In a lot of different communities just because it's like, you know, why invest all this money into something my rent's going to get raised. Why should I care? I don't have money to spend on landscaping. But I would say if you've got city council on your side and you've got some ordinances and you're seeing either non-compliance or an opportunity to improve relationships and say, hey, you know, I noticed we don't want to cite you for this, but if you want to plant some trees, this might be a good opportunity for that. And also going and talking to renters themselves, or having like community events next to bus stations or on bus routes or public transportation or carpooling events, things like that for like tree plantings. It widens the net to get more people involved. Those are some things that have been successful, but it really just depends on your community. But leveraging ordinances and policy can be very helpful.
Were there specific ordinances or policies that you have seen that were more successful?
In Texas, it was hard because it's difficult to come in and say, I'm the government, I'm here to help.
Sure.
You know how that gets taken. But in my experience, if you're looking at like a minimum, some communities have like a minimum tree ordinance, or like here in Santa Fe, when you take a tree out, you've got to like replace it with 2 or 3 trees. Now the issue is trying to get folks to work with that and be responsible about that, either via the permitting process, but a lot of people just don't know. So, you know, probably like an educational campaign is likely needed, to let people know about like the ordinances and permits. And then following up with, you know, if you do have an ordinance, like, you know, you need to do tree replacements, or like you need to have a certain percentage of canopy. If you own a certain amount of properties, or even with Airbnbs, if there's an Airbnb ordinance, or like I forget what or a secondary dwelling unit ordinance, and tying like trees into that with your city council can be an option.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Morgan.
I'll jump in on this topic for a minute as well and
Please.
build a bit on what Morgan was saying. So I would say the gap in getting trees on rental properties is almost universal. I think every community deals with that to some extent. And I would say there's a range. It's both the single family rental, but also the multifamily, really large developments that you see in more urbanized areas. And I think there's quite a range of responses based on the context. I do agree with Morgan on if it is something that you can regulate and that you can build into the system, that I think is where you see the most effective response. I know enforcement can be a dirty word, but if enforcement isn't part of the package, that is really difficult to do outside of that. I've spent a lot of time talking to renters in Denver, and I will say there is a different side of it as well. I have heard from a lot of renters that they would embrace tree planting, but they don't feel like they're allowed to, or they've even asked landlords if they can do it, and they've been told no. So I almost wonder if there isn't a regulatory side to that too, where, and I don't know what it looks like. Maybe it's part of something like if your community has a rental license program. And so if you have a rental property, you have to have it licensed, you have to have it inspected for safety. Maybe trees are actually part of that. I've tried to pitch this in other communities. I haven't successfully had it adopted, but to me, there's this real logic that if we're going to inspect a rental property for all the safety elements, and we're going to start looking at trees and canopy and heat as part of health and part of safety, could we tie those things together somehow? There's also a way to do it through permitting and inspection process, if it is, again, part of your ordinance system, which is you enforce through that process. And I've done this very effectively in some other locations. If there is a requirement to maintain trees come out, and this is really common on multifamily, not important to the property owner, property manager. They don't go back in, but you have the ability to enforce for that tree replacement through a building permit process. And so we would never want to hold up a life safety related permit, but let's say somebody comes in to do a minor remodel, refresh, addition, who knows what. That's a great mechanism to say, yes, here's your permit. Oh, and you're not in compliance with your tree planting requirements, and that needs to be complete before we file your permit. So it does take some coordination in terms of getting your building department involved, adopting it into ordinance so you have a clear legal action there. But that can be a great way to do it from an enforcement side that isn't just you going out and issuing someone a notice or violation or something that feels heavy-handed to a lot of communities.
Yeah, that's good information to share. Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the city of Grand Junction because we're working on updating our ordinance, and I wonder how they would feel if we required a tree in the right of way in front of in the right of way of every house, how they'd feel about us requiring that.
If I could just jump in one more time.
Yeah, please.
There's kind of another perspective to this as well, is community empowerment, right? So like I grew up low income, first gen high school and college grad. I used to live in Lakewood actually when it wasn't so nice in Denver, but like in the early 2000s. And sometimes with certain communities, especially the communities I grew up with and grew up in, letting people make the decisions of where they want to plant trees. And I'm not saying looking the other way, but also saying everybody's got a right to green space in communal spaces. That's something to consider.
Yeah. Carrie has a story, Carrie Thomason, my supervisor, about how important it is to talk to the community about having a conversation about, before just going in and planting a tree in the right of way, having that conversation about, do they actually want that tree there and not just doing it, especially in the lower income communities where they might not always be asked. So yeah, great point, Morgan. Thank you.
I have another discussion point, but I don't want to shift topic if somebody
No,
has
I think you're good. Go ahead, Allison.
Okay. So changing hats for me here, taking off my CTC hat and putting on my City of Alamosa hat. City of Alamosa's tree board is considering a cost share pruning program. They have a grant of about $5,000 to use to support pruning in the right of way, and per ordinance, it is the adjacent property owner's responsibility to care for the tree in the right of way. So, just trying to figure out how we would implement this program. Some of the initial discussion was only applying the funds to the street side pruning of the tree, but I'd love to get other people's ideas since I'm not really aware of another program like this anywhere.
I'm gonna jump in again. I know of a cost share program. It's not specifically for pruning, but it's for oak wilt in Texas with private landowners. It's been incredibly successful. They've had a lot of funding coming in, a lot of people taking advantage of the program as they should, cities using it. Specifically, if you're looking for feedback on that, I would probably reach out to both Texas A&M Forest Service. Pretty much anybody in the program would be able to help you about that cost share program, or even the Texas Forestry Association, or the Texas chapter of ISA. All of them have been kind of involved in this process, and it's pretty popular. It's really helping out with oak wilt mitigation. I would definitely reach out.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Anyone else have any experience with a pruning cost share?
Chris here, Town of Basalt. We don't have a formal cost sharing program, but I run into the same issue with a lot of homeowners where our ordinance explicitly states that, right-of-way trees are the explicit responsibility of the adjacent homeowner, and they're responsible for making sure the clearance and street safety underneath it are kept to a certain standard. I found though that a lot of times I will come in when I have homeowners that are kind of struggling to wrap their heads around the cost of tree care for some of those trees and can't really come to terms that, what they see as a public amenity is not being taken care of by the public, that I am willing to do a one-off cost shares a lot of times where we split pruning 50-50. But then I usually make a point to require that they have certain language within that pruning contract to make sure that they're taking care of clearance on all sides of the tree, deadwooding and light structural pruning to make sure that we're hitting both the town's goals as well as then whatever the homeowner is looking to achieve. A lot of times this is in the same conversation as like fire mitigation clearances, things like that. So a lot of times I find that it's best if just making sure that the language within your pruning contracts that are signed to take care of that tree that you're helping to pay the cost of is including some of those keywords to make sure that the part you're paying for, the town would be paying for, is actually being done, as opposed to just saying, hey, we'll split the bill 50-50 and then letting them just run with it and see where they come up with. It helps. I'm in a very small town relative to a lot of people on this video chat. We have about 4,000 residents, and maybe only half of those people have right-of-way trees to deal with. But I found that helps a lot, and it gives me a chance to kind of get to know that homeowner, engage their level of commitment, interest, and educate them on how it's to be handled.
Heather here. I have one more thing to add to this conversation. So I've done something similar to talking about in Glenwood Springs in the past. And we had a tree care assistance project where we had a specified set of funds and an application process, and residents, basically you could only qualify for the program if you meet certain parameters, if your tree has a certain risk condition, level. But I think also there's a lot to be said about partnering with the nonprofit sector when it comes to this. And I think sometimes that's the easiest route. If you look at programs like Trees Atlanta has a great program where they take care of public trees and right-of-way trees, and they have this whole like green shirt volunteer program with training people to take care of trees. It's really really a cool program.
Yeah, and there's definitely some opportunity there because I'm also working with the San Luis Valley Boys and Girls Club and working on starting a tree steward work development program. And so I like envision a lot of the kids are part of that, doing a lot of the visibility and clearance pruning in the right of way. So ideally, in my mind, this cost share program would be geared towards stuff that can't be reached from the ground, essentially.
Elizabeth, did you want to add something?
Yeah, there is some kind of a cost share program in Erie, and I don't remember the details. I want to say it might be specific to supporting HOAs. You're shaking your head.
I'm sorry, I'm responding to Alan's question.
Yeah. So I don't know, but it might be worth doing a Google and just seeing what their structure is and what they have online for information on the program.
Okay.
Denver also, we have the same ordinance language you do in terms of property owner responsibility. We do have a program for what we define as equity neighborhoods. So typically historic red line neighborhoods where we will go in and actually do hazardous pruning and removal at 100% coverage. But it is limited in the neighborhoods we can use that money in, and that might not be something that could apply for you.
Yeah, it's pretty much I mean, Alamos is such a small
yeah.
town, and everywhere you're looking at mostly low income.
Yeah.
Might
Might be
some exceptions. So,
some
and a
way to
lot of
split
those
it.
neighborhoods that are more affluent, they don't have right-of-way trees.
Yeah.
So weird.
Not applicable, but yeah, check out
Yeah.
Erie because they do something.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got a suggestion based on, I'm 5.5 years out in Littleton and stuff, but when you get that, it's a pretty small amount of money. My suggestion would be that you concentrate on, say, 4 to 15-inch trees or smaller trees. Do something that's kind of a structural pruning and something where you really get a bang for the buck, and you can do a fair number of trees if it's only $100 or $200. Because that $5,000, I mean, you can have 2 hazard trees and the money is gone. It's not there. And I think the benefits of that sort of structural pruning at the human equivalent of sort of teenage years is fantastic in terms of your payback and what you're going to get. You can go in and take trees, and then you won't really have to touch them, hopefully, for 5 or 10 years, or you really get them on their way. So that would be a big thing with me. And it's pretty easy to drive around, I think, and say, oh, there's one. You can probably pick out 30 trees and contact those people. Because otherwise, like I said, you're going to end up, might not get applications, and then it might just be, hey, you remove 2 trees, and it's like, wow, the money's gone. And really,
well, and that's a good point, Dave, because if it's smaller trees, the bill itself will be smaller, and they will be able to cover that their share of the cost easier.
Yeah, and they don't have to come back and spend $1,000 in 5 years, or 10 years. So anyway, that's my 2 bits. I'll turn my mic off.
All right. Well, thank you all we hit 11. We did it. Thank you for the conversation. That was a good question to bring up. That was perfect for the round robin. So thank you all for participating. The next meeting is April 28th. It's the week after Arbor Day week. So hopefully y'all can attend. Right now I have one presenter scheduled, Dr. Emily Luna from CSU Spur Plant Diagnostic Lab. If you know of anyone else who'd like to present, maybe Susan, you'd like to do your presentation from the plant or ProGreen or something like that, so we can just hear what you have to share about trees and water.
Sure.
But let me know. Then we have another meeting on July 21st. Was that a yes, Susan?
That was a yes.
Okay, sweet. Check that off my list. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Tuesday, not Monday. Thank you for participating. I'll get those CEUs sent up the chain. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Kimmy.
Thanks, Kimmy.